My fiancé cheated on me with my own cousin, and 5 years later she showed up at my wedding expecting forgiveness. But first, let me tell you about the moment my entire life exploded. It was less than 24 hours before my wedding, and I found a cream-colored envelope, unsealed, in my cousin's desk drawer. The handwriting on it belonged to my fiancé. My stomach dropped like a stone. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. Just 3 months earlier, I'd helped my cousin move into that very apartment. We'd spent an entire weekend painting, assembling furniture, laughing until our sides hurt about how utterly useless we were with instructions. Now, I was a whirlwind of last-minute wedding errands, dress alterations, vendor confirmations, making sure every tiny detail was perfect for tomorrow, my big day. I'd entrusted her with one simple task, checking the seating chart to prevent any awkward family feuds. Come by around 7, she'd said, I'll have wine and the seating chart ready. But the apartment was empty. No cousin. No wine. No seating chart. A knot of unease tightened in my chest. I checked her bedroom, then remembered she kept important documents in her desk. I pulled open the drawer, and there it was. Not the seating chart. The envelope. His handwriting. My name. It felt so wrong, so viscerally wrong, to see his intimacy in her private space. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away. To leave it. But my hands were already moving, pulling out the letter inside. They shook uncontrollably as I unfolded the crisp paper. The first line hit me like a physical blow. I can't keep lying to you anymore. What followed was a detailed confession that made me physically ill. 7 months. He'd been sleeping with my cousin for 7 months. 7 months of family dinners where I'd sat across from both of them, completely oblivious. 7 months of her helping me pick out wedding decorations, all while sleeping with the man I was about to marry. The letter spun a tale of guilt, of trying to stop, of it just happening over and over again. He'd written it, a pathetic attempt at honesty, but apparently, he never had the courage to give it to me. Or maybe, he was waiting until after the wedding. I found it with less than 24 hours to go. I called off the wedding that very night. I drove straight home, that crumpled letter clutched in my hand. My parents were in the living room, watching TV, their evening calm shattered the moment I walked in. They took one look at my face and knew something catastrophic had happened. I handed my mother the letter without a word. I watched her face transform from concern to disbelief, then to heartbroken fury. My father's expression shifted from confusion to a dangerous red. That son of a, he started, but my mother cut him off, her voice shaking but practical. We need to call the venue, she said. We need to cancel everything tonight before we lose more deposit money. What's the cancellation policy? I don't know, I finally managed, my voice a whisper. I can't think about money right now. I know, sweetheart, she said, her eyes welling up. I know. But we have to. We've spent. She trailed off, looking at my father. $43,000, my father finished quietly, sinking back onto the couch as if his legs couldn't hold him. $43,000 on a wedding that's not happening. My parents were devastated, not just for me, but for the financial blow. Thousands, tens of thousands, gone. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist, the band, all booked, all paid, all non-refundable. My father kept talking about suing them both, finding some legal recourse for this kind of betrayal. My mother, ever the pragmatic one, just cried and made phone calls, explaining to vendors that there would be no wedding tomorrow. The bride had discovered something that made the marriage impossible. Each call was another gut punch. The venue manager was sympathetic but firm, less than 24 hours, forfeit the entire $12,000 deposit. The caterer, the photographer, the florist, it was a cascading financial disaster. My father's face grew redder with each lost dollar. Eventually, I had to call him. My ex-fiancé. I couldn't even think his name without feeling sick. He answered on the second ring, sounding annoyingly cheerful. Hey, I was just thinking about you. Are you nervous about tomorrow? I'm nervous, good nervous, you know. I can't wait to see you walking down that aisle. I found your letter, I interrupted, my voice dead. Flat. Empty. The one you wrote to me. The confession. I found it in her desk drawer. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear him scrambling, trying to formulate a lie, a spin, anything to fix this. Finally, Vivian, I can explain. Don't, I cut him off. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Don't say anything except goodbye. The wedding is done. Completely done. If you try to contact me again, I'll get a restraining order. Do you understand me? But Vivian, please, just let me. I hung up. Then I turned off my phone, letting my parents handle the rest of the fallout. My aunt and uncle showed up at my house within the hour. I'd called my cousin from my parents' house, put her on speaker so they could hear everything. How could you? I'd asked. She'd cried, she'd made excuses, she'd blamed it on the love and fate, things beyond her control. Apparently, she'd then called her parents immediately. And they must have broken every speed limit to get to our house that fast. They didn't knock. They burst through the front door like they owned the place. My aunt was already crying, my uncle red-faced and defensive. My mother stood up, positioning herself between us like a physical barrier. You need to leave, my mother said, her voice ice-cold. I'd never heard her sound like that before. We need to talk about this, my uncle insisted, pushing past her. We need to fix this. It's not as bad as it seems. Not as bad. My father stood up, too, and suddenly, our living room felt very small. Your daughter has been sleeping with Vivian's fiancé for 7 months. 7 months while she helped plan the wedding, while she pretended to be a friend. And you're telling us it's not as bad as it seems. You're overreacting, my uncle scoffed. And that's when something broke inside me. I stood up, and everyone turned to look. Overreacting? I asked, my voice still flat, still dead, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. Your daughter destroyed my life. My wedding is tomorrow. Tomorrow. The flowers are ordered. The food is prepared. My dress is hanging in my closet. 200 people are planning to show up to watch me marry someone who's been cheating on me with my own cousin, and you think I'm overreacting? Young people make mistakes, my uncle said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I actually laughed then, a horrible, bitter sound that didn't even sound like it came from me. She's young. She didn't mean to hurt anyone. It just happened. They fell in love. You can't help who you fall in love with. You need to find it in your heart to forgive. Get out, my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. Get out of my house right now. My aunt reached for me, tried to hug me. Please, Vivian. She's devastated. She's been crying all day. She never wanted you to find out like this. They were going to tell you after the wedding. Give you time to adjust. After the wedding. My mother's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. They were going to let her marry him knowing he was in love with someone else, knowing he'd been cheating on her for months. How is that better? How is that anything other than cruel? The argument escalated from there. My uncle accused me of being unforgiving and cold. My father told him to get out of our house before he physically removed him. My aunt begged everyone to calm down and think about the family. My mother told her there was no family anymore. Not after this. It ended with my aunt and uncle storming out, my uncle yelling that we'd regret cutting them off, that family was supposed to forgive each other no matter what. That we were tearing the family apart over a simple mistake. The family split down the middle almost immediately. My parents, my brother, and my grandmother cut off all contact with my aunt, uncle, and my cousin. Some of the extended family tried to stay neutral, attending both sides' holiday celebrations, but that didn't last long. You can't stay neutral when someone does something like this. My aunt, God bless her audacity, started spreading rumors. That I'd been a terrible fiancé, cold and distant, that I'd driven him into my cousin's arms. She told people I'd been withholding intimacy, that I was obsessed with work and didn't pay attention to him, that my cousin had just been there to comfort him when I wasn't. None of it was true. Our relationship had been normal, happy even. We'd had the usual disagreements about wedding planning or where to live, but nothing serious. Nothing that would explain or excuse what he'd done. But facts didn't matter to my aunt. She needed to protect her daughter's reputation, even if it meant destroying mine. 6 months later, they got married, my ex-fiancé and my cousin. I found out through a mutual friend who thought I should know, just in case I saw the photos on social media. They sent out announcements with a photo of them kissing on a beach at sunset, looking blissfully happy. The caption was something about true love finding a way and overcoming obstacles together. Like I'd been an obstacle. Like my pain and humiliation had been nothing more than an inconvenience on their path to happiness. My mother received one in the mail and called me sobbing. She couldn't understand how they could be so cruel. She wanted to drive to their house and tell them exactly what she thought. I told her to throw it away and block their numbers. I'd already done the same weeks earlier. My cousin tried to reach out a few times in those early months, sending long text messages about how sorry she was, but how she'd found real love and hoped I could be happy for her someday. One message, in particular, made me see red. She wrote, "I never meant for any of this to happen. We tried so hard to stay away from each other, but the heart wants what it wants. I hope someday you'll understand that what we have is real and that it wasn't about hurting you. It was about finding our soulmate. I think if you really loved him, you'd want him to be happy, even if it's not with you." The sheer narcissism of that message, the complete inability to take responsibility or acknowledge the pain she'd caused, made me want to throw my phone against a wall. Instead, I blocked her number. Then I blocked him. Then I blocked both of them on every social media platform I could think of. I blocked my aunt and uncle, too. I didn't want to see their happy family photos or their justifications for what their daughter had done. I just wanted them gone. From my life. Completely. Some people think forgiveness is noble. I think boundaries are more important. I think protecting yourself from people who've proven they'll hurt you is smarter than pretending to forgive them so other people will think you're a good person. My therapist agreed. She told me that forgiveness is optional, that I didn't owe it to anyone, especially not to people who'd never genuinely apologized or taken responsibility for their actions. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, though. That was gutting enough. The worst part was realizing I'd been blind to it. All those times my fiancé had been working late or my cousin had been too busy to hang out. The way they'd look at each other during family gatherings, quick glances I dismissed as nothing. Looking back, I could see all the signs I'd missed or explained away. The way he'd started coming home smelling like her perfume. The way she'd started asking detailed questions about our relationship, about our sex life, about whether we were happy. I'd thought she was being supportive, interested in my life. She'd been gathering intelligence. I'd introduced them, for God's sake. At my grandmother's birthday party 3 years earlier, I'd literally said, "You two should talk. You both love hiking." I thought I was being nice, bringing together two people I cared about. I'd facilitated my own betrayal and hadn't even known it. That realization hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. I'd handed him to her on a silver platter and smiled while I did it. I spent the next year in therapy, working through the anger and humiliation and the crushing blow to my self-esteem. My therapist kept telling me that healing wasn't linear, that some days would be harder than others. She was right. Some mornings, I'd wake up fine, ready to face the day. And by noon, I'd be crying in my car in a parking lot because I'd heard a song that reminded me of him. Or I'd see a couple holding hands and have a panic attack, convinced I'd never be able to trust anyone again. There were dark days. Days when I couldn't get out of bed. Days when I'd drive past their house just to torture myself with the evidence of their happiness. Days when I'd scroll through social media on fake accounts just to see what they were posting, even though I knew it would hurt. My therapist called it picking at a scab, preventing the wound from healing by constantly reopening it. She was right. But I couldn't seem to stop myself. But slowly, things got better. I threw myself into my work, got a promotion, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I started going to yoga classes and made friends with women who didn't know anything about my past. I took up painting and discovered I was actually pretty good at it. I learned to cook elaborate meals just for myself, treating myself with the care and attention I'd been giving to someone who didn't deserve it. It took time, a lot of time, but I rebuilt myself into someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. Someone who could see red flags and actually pay attention to them instead of making excuses. Someone who understood that being alone was better than being with someone who didn't truly value her. By the way, if you're still with me through this wild ride, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are definitely coming your way. 5 years passed before I even considered dating seriously again. I'd had a few casual relationships, nothing that lasted more than a few months. There was the guy I met at a bookstore who turned out to still be hung up on his ex-wife. The woman from my yoga class who was sweet but ultimately wanted different things from life. A few awkward first dates that never led to second ones. I'd convinced myself I was fine with that maybe I just wasn't meant for the marriage and family thing. Maybe some people were better off alone. Maybe I was one of them. Then I met someone at a work conference in another city. Someone who made me laugh so hard I snorted wine through my nose at dinner. We were at this networking event, one of those forced mingling situations where everyone's trying too hard to be professional and interesting. He was standing by the bar, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. And when our eyes met, he made this face that said, "Kill me now," so clearly that I burst out laughing. "That bad?" I asked, walking over. "I've been here for 20 minutes and I've already heard the phrase synergistic paradigm shift 3 times, he said. "I'm starting to think everyone here is speaking a language I don't understand." We ended up talking for 2 hours straight, ignoring the networking entirely. He was smart and funny and self-deprecating in a way that felt genuine rather than performative. He listened when I talked and actually remembered the small details I mentioned in passing. 2 days later, he called and asked if I wanted to get dinner the next time I was in town. "I don't do long distance," I told him immediately. "I barely do dating in the same city." "How about we just see what happens," he suggested. "No pressure, no expectations, just 2 people who make each other laugh." And somehow, that worked. We saw each other when we could, talked on the phone when we couldn't. And slowly, I felt myself opening up again. He was patient with my trust issues, understanding when I'd pull back or panic for no obvious reason. He never pushed, never demanded more than I was ready to give. About 8 months in, we had our first real test. I was supposed to meet him for dinner after work, but he texted saying he had to cancel, that something had come up. That was it. No explanation, no details, just something came up. "Can we reschedule?" I stared at that text for a full minute, feeling my chest tighten. Something came up. That's what my ex-fiancé used to say when he was with my cousin. Something came up at work. Something came up with a friend. Something came up. It was always something. And that something was always her. I called him. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. By the 3rd unanswered call, I was having a full panic attack in my office bathroom, convinced that history was repeating itself. That I'd been stupid enough to trust someone again, and they were proving me right about men, about relationships, about everything. He showed up at my office an hour later, still in his work clothes, looking panicked. "I'm so sorry. I saw your missed calls. I was at the hospital." My phone was on silent. The hospital. My panic shifted instantly to concern. "Are you okay? What happened?" "My dad had a fall. He's okay now. Just a concussion and some bruises, but it was scary for a while. I'm sorry I didn't call you back right away. I should have explained in the text. I should have." I burst into tears right there in the office lobby, in front of coworkers and clients and everyone. Big, ugly, relieved sobs. He wrapped his arms around me, confused, but comforting. And I realized how broken I still was, how much work I still had to do. We talked about it that night. Really talked. I told him everything about my ex-fiancé and my cousin, about the letter and the cancelled wedding and the years of therapy. I told him about my trust issues and my panic attacks and my tendency to assume the worst. I told him I understood if it was too much, if he wanted someone less damaged, less complicated. Everyone's complicated, he said. Everyone's got baggage. Yours just happens to be a matched set of luggage with some very specific triggers. We'll figure it out together, but you have to talk to me when you're spiraling. You have to give me a chance to explain before you assume I'm him. That's not fair to you, I said. Let me decide what's fair to me, he replied. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Baggage and all. We worked through it together. We started couples therapy, even though we weren't even officially dating yet, just to have tools to handle my trust issues and his tendency to assume I was fine when I wasn't. Slowly, I learned to trust again, to believe that not everyone was like my ex-fiancé or my cousin, that some people meant what they said and followed through on their promises. It wasn't a smooth path, but it was real, and that made all the difference. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and those 2 years weren't always easy. My trust issues surfaced in unexpected ways. 6 months into dating, I had a full panic attack when he was late coming home from work and didn't answer his phone. I'd convinced myself he was with someone else. That history was repeating itself. He found me crying on my apartment floor, hyperventilating. Instead of getting defensive, he sat with me until I could breathe again, then showed me his phone, his calendar, everything. I'm not him, he said quietly. And I'll prove it to you as many times as you need. There were other moments, too. Times when I'd pull back emotionally, testing him to see if he'd leave. Times when I'd accuse him of things he hadn't done because my brain was looking for evidence that he'd betray me, too. He could have walked away. Most people would have, but he stayed patient, suggesting couples therapy when things got particularly rough, never making me feel broken for struggling. We worked through it together. Slowly. I learned to trust again, to believe that not everyone was like my ex-fiancé or my cousin, that some people meant what they said and followed through on their promises. It wasn't a smooth path, but it was real. And that made all the difference. There was no big production when he finally proposed. No flash mob or stadium announcement. We were hiking in the mountains on a random Tuesday afternoon, and he just stopped on the trail, pulled out a ring, and said, "I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me." I ugly cried for about 15 minutes straight while other hikers awkwardly walked past us. When I finally stopped crying enough to speak, I said yes. Planning this wedding was completely different from the first time. I wasn't stressed or anxious or trying to make everything perfect. I just wanted to marry someone I loved. Surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us. We kept the guest list small, maybe 70 people, all close friends and family members who'd supported me through everything. No distant relatives who might bring drama. No plus ones for people we barely knew. Just our inner circle, the people who mattered most. The estimated cost was reasonable. Nothing extravagant, but still more than we'd initially planned to spend. We'd been saving for a while, but weddings are expensive no matter how you slice it. We considered scaling back, maybe doing a courthouse ceremony with a small dinner after, but my mother insisted we do something special. "You deserve a real wedding," she kept saying. "Don't let what happened before rob you of that." That's when my aunt and uncle reached out through my mother, because I still had them blocked on everything. My mother called me one evening, her voice cautious. "Your aunt and uncle want to talk to you about the wedding." I told them I'd ask you first, that I wouldn't force anything, but they said they have something important to discuss. My first instinct was to refuse immediately. I hadn't spoken to them in 5 years, hadn't seen them, hadn't thought about them, except when family members mentioned them in passing. They'd made their choice when they defended my cousin's affair and tried to blame me for it. But something in my mother's voice made me pause. Did they say what they wanted to talk about? "Money," my mother said bluntly. "They want to contribute to the wedding." They called it making amends. I should have known better. I really should have. But 5 years had passed, and I'd done a lot of healing in that time. I'd convinced myself that maybe people could change, that maybe they'd finally realized how wrong they'd been. So, against my better judgment, against every instinct screaming at me to stay away, I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, where I knew I could leave quickly if needed. They looked older than I remembered. My uncle's hair had gone almost completely gray, and my aunt had these deep lines around her mouth that I didn't recall. They stood when I walked in, and I saw my aunt's hand shake as she reached for her coffee cup. We exchanged awkward pleasantries for a few minutes, talking about the weather and the traffic, avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, my uncle cleared his throat and said they wanted to pay for my wedding. All of it. The venue, the food, the flowers, the band, the photographer. Everything. They wanted to make amends for what their daughter had done, to show me they recognized how wrong it had been. I sat there in silence, trying to process what I was hearing. My aunt leaned forward, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. We've had a lot of time to think about what happened, about how we handled it. And we were wrong, Vivian. So wrong. We should have supported you. We should have told our daughter that what she did was unforgivable. Instead, we defended her and lost you in the process. We can't undo that. But we can do this. Please let us do this. Why now? I asked, my voice harsher than I intended. It's been 5 years. Why suddenly care about making amends now? My uncle looked down at his hands. Because I almost died 6 months ago. Heart attack. And lying in that hospital bed, I realized I'd wasted 5 years being too proud to admit I was wrong. I'd let my pride cost me my niece, someone I loved like a daughter. I don't know how much time I have left, and I don't want to waste any more of it estranged from family. I wanted to believe them. God, I wanted to believe that they'd genuinely changed, that they'd finally seen their daughter for who she really was. But I was cautious. What about your daughter? Does she know you're doing this? My aunt hesitated, and I saw the truth in that hesitation before she spoke. She knows. She's supportive of it. She wants to make amends, too. There it was. The crack in the facade. My cousin was involved somehow, which meant this wasn't just about my aunt and uncle's guilt. This was about something else, something I couldn't quite see yet. But I was tired of being suspicious, tired of seeing threats in every kind gesture. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe they really had changed. I need to think about it, I said. And I need to talk to my fiancé. This affects both of us. They gave me their word that there would be no strings attached, no conditions, no attempts to force me to reconcile with my cousin. They just wanted to do this one thing to try to make amends. My uncle even wrote it down on a napkin and signed it like a contract. No interference in planning, no demands about the guest list. No expectations beyond being invited as guests ourselves. That's all we ask. I left that meeting feeling confused and a little hopeful. Maybe people could change. Maybe they'd finally seen their daughter for who she really was. Maybe this was genuine. My fiancé was skeptical when I told him that evening. We were cooking dinner together in my tiny apartment kitchen, and I watched his face as I explained the offer. It feels like a trap, he said. And he wasn't wrong to think that. Why would they suddenly want to give you tens of thousands of dollars with no strings attached? Your uncle had a heart attack, a near-death experience, made him reevaluate his priorities, or made him realize he needs to do something big to manipulate you into forgiving his daughter. He wasn't trying to be cruel, just realistic. I'm not saying don't take the money if you want to. I'm just saying we should be very, very careful about the conditions. We talked for hours that night, going over every possible angle. What could they want? What could go wrong? How could we protect ourselves? Eventually, we decided to meet with them again. This time, both of us together, and lay out explicit ground rules. If they agreed to everything, we'd accept. If they pushed back on anything, we'd walk away. The second meeting went better than expected, though I brought my maid of honor, Jenna, with me for moral support. She sat beside me at the coffee shop, a silent presence that made me feel stronger. My fiancé laid out our terms clearly and firmly. They would transfer the money to my account. I would pay all vendors directly. They would have zero input on any planning decisions. The guest list was final and non-negotiable, and they would attend as regular guests with no special recognition or involvement. My uncle pulled out a notepad and wrote down every condition. I understand, he said. And I agree to all of it. We just want to do this one thing to show we're sorry. Nothing more. My aunt nodded vigorously. We've made so many mistakes. We chose the wrong side. We defended the indefensible, but we want to make it right, even if it's just this one gesture. Why should I believe you? I asked. You've had 5 years to make it right. Why now? My uncle's hand went to his chest almost unconsciously. Because I realized how much time I've wasted being stubborn, being proud, defending my daughter when she was indefensible. That heart attack made me realize that I might not have much time left. And I don't want to die estranged from my niece, someone I love like a daughter. It sounded sincere. It felt sincere. But I'd been fooled before. If this is a trick, I said slowly. If you're planning anything at all, I will never speak to you again. And neither will anyone else in this family. You understand that? We understand, my aunt said. We promise. No tricks, no hidden agenda, just this gift and a chance to watch you marry someone who truly loves you. My fiancé wasn't entirely convinced even after the meeting. I still think there's something off, he said as we drove home. But if you want to accept, we can protect ourselves. Separate account for the wedding money, everything in writing, multiple escape plans if things go sideways. You sound like you're planning a heist, not a wedding, I said. But I was grateful for his caution. I'm planning to protect you, he corrected, from people who've hurt you before. The planning went smoothly after that. My aunt and uncle transferred $45,000 into a dedicated wedding account I'd set up specifically for this purpose. The money never touched my personal finances. I paid the vendors directly from that account, keeping meticulous records of every transaction. My fiancé and I made every decision together, enjoying the process this time instead of stressing over it. They didn't call or text asking for updates. They didn't try to add their daughter's name to the guest list or suggest we accidentally send her an invitation. For months, everything seemed fine, and I actually started to relax. Started to believe that maybe they genuinely changed, that maybe this was their way of finally choosing me. I should have listened to my therapist. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have known that people who'd spent years defending the indefensible weren't going to suddenly develop a conscience. I really should have known better. The welcome cocktail reception was scheduled for 5 o'clock in the evening, 1 hour before the ceremony. It was supposed to be an intimate gathering of our closest friends and family. Just drinks and light appetizers in a beautiful garden setting before we all moved to the main venue for the actual wedding. The setting was beautiful. An outdoor garden space with string lights and comfortable seating areas, flowers everywhere, soft music playing from hidden speakers. My bridesmaids and I arrived early to take photos, laughing and toasting with champagne, feeling genuinely happy and excited. My dress was perfect. Not the same dress I'd chosen for the first wedding, obviously. I donated that one to charity years ago. Couldn't bear to look at it. This dress was different, simpler, more elegant, more me. My bridesmaids wore soft blue dresses, and we'd taken dozens of photos in the garden, capturing moments of genuine joy. I remember thinking that this was how a wedding day was supposed to feel, peaceful, happy, full of love and anticipation. Guests started arriving around 4:30, and everything felt perfect. My brother was manning the entrance with the guest list, checking people in with a warm smile and directing them to the bar. My future mother-in-law was helping arrange the seating cards. My father was greeting guests, shaking hands, looking genuinely happy for the first time since my first engagement had imploded. I was inside the venue's bridal suite with my bridesmaids, touching up my makeup, and trying not to cry happy tears that would ruin my mascara. Then I heard shouting from outside. Not normal party chatter, but actual raised voices, angry and confrontational. My heart instantly seized. I ran to the window and saw my cousin standing at the entrance with her husband and their 2 kids. My ex-fiancé. The man who'd written me that confession letter 5 years ago and then married my cousin anyway. The man I hadn't seen or thought about in months. They were dressed formally, like invited guests, with the kids in cute little outfits that matched their parents. My ex-fiancé was wearing a suit similar to the one he'd planned to wear to our wedding. My cousin was in a dress that was way too formal for a cocktail reception, almost bridal in its elegance, like she dressed for a different kind of event entirely. My aunt was rushing toward them with her arms outstretched, a huge smile on her face, like this was a planned reunion moment. My uncle was right behind her, looking nervous but determined. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. The generous offer. The lack of interference. The months of silence. They'd been planning this. All of it. They'd been waiting for this exact moment to spring their trap. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. My maid of honor, Jenna, grabbed my arm to steady me. She'd been my rock through the entire first betrayal. The friend who'd shown up with wine and tissues every time I needed to cry. "Are you okay?" "Who is that?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "My cousin," I managed to say, "and my ex. They're trying to crash my wedding." I watched through the window as my brother stepped in front of them, blocking their path. He's not a big guy, my brother, but he played football in college, and he can be intimidating when he wants to be. His voice carried through the garden, sharp and authoritative. "Names, please. And I'll need to see your invitation." My cousin's face flushed red, even from a distance. I could see her anger and embarrassment. "We don't have a physical invitation," she huffed, "but we're family. My parents are paying for this entire wedding. We have every right to be here." The entitlement in her voice made me want to scream. The assumption that money bought her access to my life, to my wedding, to my happiness. My aunt jumped in, trying to smooth things over, saying something about how of course they were invited, that this was all arranged, that there had been a misunderstanding about the guest list. That's when my fiancé's three brothers, all broad-shouldered former college athletes, appeared from different corners of the garden and formed a wall next to my brother. They'd been scattered among the guests, helping to set up and greet people, but they converged instantly when they saw the confrontation. The oldest one, who works as a bouncer on weekends and has shoulders like a linebacker, crossed his arms and said in a voice that could cut glass, "No invitation, no entry. Those are the rules. Show us your invitation or leave the property." Guests were starting to notice now. Conversations were stopping, heads turning toward the entrance. My cousin's kids were whining, confused about why they couldn't go to the party. My ex-fiancé was standing there looking deeply uncomfortable, his hand on my cousin's arm like he was trying to pull her away, but she was rooted to the spot, arguing. I ran outside at that point. I didn't care about staying hidden until the ceremony or keeping my dress pristine. I didn't care that everyone would see me before I walked down the aisle. I marched up to the entrance, my heels clicking on the stone pathway, my dress rustling around my legs. The crowd of guests parted for me like I was Moses and they were the Red Sea. The look on my cousin's face when she saw me was almost worth the entire nightmare. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth dropped open. And for a second, she looked genuinely shocked, like she hadn't expected me to actually confront her. Then she smiled. Actually smiled. Like she thought I'd be happy to see her. Like we were old friends reuniting after a long absence. "Vivian." Surprise. "We wanted to get out." My voice was shaking, but loud enough that every single guest in the garden turned to look. 70 people, all silent, all watching this confrontation unfold. "Get out right now." My cousin's smile faltered. "But we came all this way. The kids are so excited to see a wedding. And my parents invited us," they said. "I don't care what they said. You are not welcome here. You will never be welcome anywhere I am. Get out of my sight before I have you arrested for trespassing." My aunt started crying immediately. These loud, dramatic sobs that were clearly meant to make me look like the villain. "We paid for this wedding. We have every right to be here. We just wanted to bring the family back together, to heal old wounds. You paid with my money." I was screaming now, months and years of repressed anger pouring out of me in front of 70 witnesses. My mother had appeared at my side, and my father was right behind her. My grandmother was making her way over with her cane, moving faster than I'd seen her move in years. "You deposited money into my account, and I paid the vendors. This is my wedding, bought with my money that you gave me. You have no claim to this event. You have no right to alter the guest list. You have no authority to invite anyone, especially not the woman who destroyed my life and the man who helped her do it. The truth of that statement seemed to hit everyone at once. My aunt had technically paid for the wedding, yes, but the money had gone through my account. I'd signed the contracts with the vendors. I'd made the payments. Legally, morally, in every way that mattered, this was my wedding that I'd paid for with money they'd given me as a gift. They had no claim to it, no right to alter the guest list, no authority to invite anyone. Several guests started shouting at my aunt and uncle to leave. People I barely knew. Friends of my fiancé's family. Co-workers who'd become friends. All of them yelling in support of me. You should be ashamed, someone shouted. How dare you try to ambush her at her own wedding, another voice called out. The mob mentality was building. Righteous anger on my behalf flowing through the crowd like electricity. My grandmother reached us then, her face red with fury. She hobbled over on her cane and pointed it at my cousin like a weapon. You should be ashamed of yourself, she said, her voice steady despite her age. Showing up here with your husband, the man you stole from your own family, thinking you'd be welcomed after what you did? After the humiliation you caused. You have no shame, girl. None at all. I'm ashamed to call you my granddaughter. My cousin's kid started crying, confused and scared by all the yelling. The little boy was tugging on his mother's dress, asking why everyone was mad, why they had to leave. The little girl was sobbing into her father's shoulder. I felt bad for them for about half a second, then remembered that their mother had destroyed my life years ago and then tried to force her way into my wedding today. Those children were innocent, but that didn't mean I had to let their parents use them as shields. My ex-fiancé, to his credit, or maybe just his cowardice, hadn't said a word. He just stood there looking at the ground while his wife argued with my family and guests. His face was red, his jaw clenched, and he looked like he wanted to be absolutely anywhere else in the world. Good. I hoped he was as miserable as I'd been when I found that letter. We're calling the police if you don't leave in the next 60 seconds, my fiancé said, phone already in his hand. This is trespassing. You were explicitly not invited, and you're disrupting a private event. That's what finally did it. My aunt grabbed my cousin's arm. My uncle scooped up one of the crying kids, and they started backing toward the parking lot. The garden had gone almost completely silent except for the children's sobs. A few guests muttered their disapproval, but mostly people just stared in uncomfortable shock at what had just unfolded. But not before my cousin turned to me and said, "You're going to regret this. We were trying to help you, and you're being cruel." She practically ran to their car. They peeled out of the parking lot so fast that gravel sprayed everywhere. My aunt and uncle followed in their own car minutes later, my aunt still visibly crying. I stood there, shaking, my perfect wedding day already tainted by their presence. Jenna wrapped an arm around my shoulders while my other bridesmaids formed a protective circle. My fiancé rushed over from where he'd been greeting guests, took one look at the situation, and immediately understood. Deep breath, he whispered in my ear. They're leaving. They can't hurt you anymore. His brothers were still blocking the entrance, and I could see other guests gathering behind us. A wall of support I hadn't expected, but deeply appreciated. My cousin tried one more time. Vivian, please just hear me out. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. We used to be so close. We were never close, I interrupted, my voice steadier now. I thought we were. But you were lying to me for 7 months while you slept with my fiancé. Close people don't do that. Family doesn't do that. You made your choice years ago. Now live with it. My ex-fiancé finally spoke, his voice barely audible. Let's just go. This was a mistake. I told you this was a mistake. He was trying to pull my cousin toward their car, but she was still rooted to the spot, tears streaming down her face now. I'm sorry, she shouted, loud enough that every single person in the garden could hear. I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I've been sorry for 5 years. I made a mistake, and I've paid for it every single day. My marriage is falling apart. My family won't speak to me, and you won't even give me a chance to explain. The garden was completely silent now. 70 people watching this woman have a breakdown at someone else's wedding. Part of me felt bad for her. A very small part. But the larger part remembered finding that letter, remembered canceling my wedding, remembered years of therapy and trust issues and rebuilding myself from scratch. You haven't paid for it, I said quietly. You married him. You got what you wanted. And the fact that it's not working out isn't my problem. It's yours. Now leave my wedding before I call the police. The actual ceremony was beautiful, despite everything. I managed to push the confrontation out of my mind and focus on marrying the person I loved. But in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't over. My aunt and uncle had tried to manipulate me, had tried to force a reconciliation I'd never wanted, and they'd failed spectacularly in front of dozens of witnesses. There would be fallout from this. 3 weeks after the wedding, after we'd returned from a beautiful honeymoon in the mountains, my mother called with news. The family grapevine had been working overtime, and details about what had really happened were starting to emerge. Apparently, my aunt and uncle had been planning this reconciliation attempt for several months. They'd started saving money and had approached my cousin about it a few months before reaching out to me, hoping that paying for my wedding would earn them enough goodwill to bring her as a surprise guest. My cousin had encouraged the plan. She and my ex-fiancé had discussed it, debating whether showing up would actually work or just make things worse. They'd apparently gone back and forth on it right up until the day of the wedding, finally deciding to take the chance. It was impulsive and poorly thought out, but they'd convinced themselves that seeing them in person might soften me, that I'd be too polite to cause a scene at my own wedding. The manipulation was calculated enough to make me feel sick. My mother told me that my grandmother had been the one to uncover most of this information. After the wedding confrontation, she'd called my uncle and demanded to know what they'd been thinking. In his guilt and frustration, he'd admitted the whole plan. Grandma had told him he was manipulative and that she was ashamed to have raised such a spineless man. Then she'd called every family member she could reach and told them exactly what had happened. The fallout was immediate and devastating for my aunt and uncle. Family members who'd been neutral or sympathetic to them turned against them overnight. My uncle's business started losing clients as word spread through their social circles. My mother also mentioned that my cousin's marriage was apparently falling apart, with constant fights about whose fault the wedding disaster had been. I decided to take action to protect myself legally. I met with a lawyer and had him draft a letter to my aunt, uncle, and cousin formally establishing boundaries and threatening legal action if they tried to contact me again. The letter was clear and explicit: no contact through any medium. No showing up at my home or workplace. No attempts to communicate through third parties. All 3 of them signed for their letters within 2 days. None of them attempted to contact me after that. 2 months after the wedding, more news filtered through despite my efforts to stay disconnected. My cousin had been trying to reach out through various family members, asking for a private meeting with me. Each message was similar: she desperately needed to talk to me, to apologize properly, to explain things I didn't understand. I refused immediately and firmly. There was nothing she could say that would change what had happened. But my mother did share one piece of information that caught my attention. Apparently, my cousin and her husband were fighting about more than just the wedding stunt. There were whispers about their oldest child, questions about paternity that my ex-fiancé had started asking. The timeline had always been tight, and the child didn't look like either parent. The results came back 2 weeks later. The older son was not my ex-fiancé's biological child. Their younger daughter was his, confirmed by the same test at the same time. But the boy wasn't. My cousin had been pregnant by someone else when she married my ex-fiancé, and she'd let him believe the child was his for almost 5 years. My mother's voice was shaking when she told me this over the phone, not from sympathy for my cousin, but from shock at the sheer scope of the deception. 5 years, she kept saying. She let him raise another man's child for 5 years. She let your aunt and uncle believe they had a grandson. How does someone do that? I sat on my couch in my new house across the country, my hand on my growing belly, trying to process what I was hearing. My cousin had been having an affair while having an affair. She'd been sleeping with someone else while sleeping with my fiancé while I was planning my wedding to him. The layers of betrayal were staggering. Who's the father? I asked. Does anyone know? She won't say. Apparently, she's claiming she doesn't know, that it could be one of several people. Can you imagine? She doesn't even know who the father of her own child is. My mother sounded disgusted, and I didn't blame her. My ex-fiancé filed for divorce immediately. According to my mother, he moved out of their house that same day, taking only his clothes and his biological daughter. He left my cousin with the son who wasn't his and the wreckage of yet another failed relationship. He wanted primary custody of his biological daughter and was demanding that my cousin begin repaying him for every cent he'd spent raising a child that wasn't his. The lawyer bills alone are going to bankrupt her, my mother said. Your aunt and uncle are trying to help, but they're already stretched thin from the wedding debacle and the business losses. I heard your uncle had to let go of half his staff last month. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like justice had been served, like karma had finally caught up with someone who'd wronged me so deeply. And I did feel those things a little bit, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of the drama. Tired of hearing about my cousin's implosion. Tired of being connected to this mess even from thousands of miles away. My husband came home from work while I was still on the phone with my mother. He took one look at my face and mouthed, "Your cousin." I nodded, and he kissed the top of my head before heading into the kitchen to start dinner, giving me space to finish the conversation, but staying close enough that I knew he was there. That's who he was. Patient. Understanding. Present. Mom, I interrupted her mid-sentence about court dates and custody evaluations. I need you to stop. I need you to stop telling me about her. I don't want to know anymore unless it directly affects me legally or physically. I don't want updates. I moved across the country to get away from this. I need you to help me actually stay away from it. There was silence on the other end of the line, then quietly, "You're right. I'm sorry. I just thought you'd want to know. But you're right. This isn't your problem anymore." "It never was my problem," I said. "It was hers. And she's going to have to figure it out on her own." The divorce proceedings dragged on for months, getting uglier with each court appearance. My ex-fiancé was determined in his pursuit of custody and his demands for financial accountability. He wanted primary physical custody of their daughter, arguing that my cousin's pattern of deception made her unfit for equal parenting time. He wanted to be released from all financial obligations for the child who wasn't his. The courts gave him much of what he wanted. The final judgment granted him primary physical custody of their daughter, with my cousin getting standard visitation every other weekend. The son remained primarily with my cousin, but my ex-fiancé was released from all financial obligations for him. The judge ordered my cousin to begin repaying him for years of child support over the next several years. My aunt and uncle tried to help their daughter financially, but the combination of legal fees and support payments had strained their resources significantly. My uncle's business had lost several clients after word spread about the wedding incident, forcing him to scale back operations. The stress was taking a visible toll on their marriage and their relationship with extended family. Meanwhile, I was planning a nursery. My husband and I had found out I was pregnant a few weeks earlier, and we were over the moon excited. We'd been trying for a few months, hoping to start our family in our new city, away from all the drama and dysfunction. The timing felt right. We were settled, financially stable, and deeply in love. Everything I'd thought I'd have with my ex-fiancé, I actually had with my husband, but built on honesty and trust instead of deception. My husband and I celebrated our first wedding anniversary quietly. Just the two of us and a nice dinner at our favorite local restaurant. We'd been in our new city for almost 9 months, and it truly felt like home now. My pregnancy was progressing smoothly, and we were both excited and terrified about becoming parents. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, my husband asked if I ever thought about my ex-fiancé or my cousin anymore. I realized I hadn't in weeks. They'd become like characters from a book I'd read years ago. Memorable, but not real. Not part of my present life. "You know what I think about?" I told him. "I think about how lucky I am that it all fell apart when it did. If I'd married him, I'd never have met you. We wouldn't be having this baby. Everything good in my life exists because that relationship ended." He smiled and kissed my forehead. That's a really healthy way to look at it. I'm not angry anymore, I said. And I meant it. I'm just grateful for where I am now. And I really was. My cousin had tried to steal my happiness and ended up giving me a reason to find something better. While her life fell apart from her own choices, I got to build something genuine and lasting. That night, my husband and I finished painting the nursery. We'd chosen a soft yellow color, neutral and warm. We assembled the crib together, hung pictures on the walls, organized tiny clothes in the dresser. Standing in the doorway looking at the finished room, he wrapped his arm around my waist, his hand joining mine on my belly. "This is our life," he said. "Our family. Our fresh start. This is everything." I agreed. And it was.